Good morning and welcome to Sunday morning, the 18th of July. And we are going to jump into the book of Corinthians, both books, the first and second, the two letters to Corinth that we have in our New Testament right after Romans. And quite a bit different. Some similarities between Corinthians and Romans. Some of the same issues will be covered, but while Romans was a well-ordered treatise on the faith, Corinthians is like a question and answer, an interview almost kind of set up where Paul has heard about issues in the church in Corinth and he addresses them. And doesn't seem like to be in any particular order, but the topics, a lot of topics, and different ones are handled in these two letters. And so that's where we'll be this week with John Stott. Today's devotion on this Sunday morning is power through weakness. Power through weakness. The suggested reading is 1 Corinthians 1:18 through to 1 Corinthians 2, verse 5. 1:18 to 2:5. The lead-in verse, however, comes from chapter 4 of Corinthians, chapter 4, verse 7. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Some of us getting older, we recognize these bodies we're in are jars of clay. They're beginning to dry out and get cracked easily, but the power of God is still in them. And though the outward man decays, the inward man, woman, can be renewed day by day. So here's how we're going to start out this week with John Stott in Corinthians. One of the overriding themes of the Corinthian correspondence is power through weakness. There are 8 distinct expressions of it in the two letters. Of course, the lust for power has been a characteristic of the human story ever since Adam and Eve were offered power in exchange for disobedience. Still, today, the pursuit of money, fame, and influence is a concealed drive for power. We see it in politics and in public life, in big business and industry, in the professions and the media, and even in the church and in parachurch organizations. Power. It is more intoxicating than alcohol, more addictive than drugs. It was Lord Acton, the 19th century British politician, who composed the epigram, "Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely." He was a Roman Catholic who in 1870 strongly opposed the decision of the First Vatican Council to attribute infallibility to the Pope. He saw it as power corrupting the church. The Bible contains clear warnings about the use and abuse of power, and Paul insisted on his theme of power through weakness, divorce through human weakness. In the first 2 chapters of 1 Corinthians, he gives 3 striking examples of the same principle. We see it first in the gospel itself, for the weakness of the cross is the saving power of God, 1 Corinthians 1:17 through 25. Secondly, we see power through weakness in the Corinthian converts, for God had chosen weak people to shame the strong. Actually going to cite that passage this morning, later on in the sermon. Thirdly, power through weakness is exhibited in Paul the evangelist, since he had come to Corinth, quote, in weakness and fear and with much trembling, unquote, but also, quote, with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, 1 Corinthians 2, 1 through 5. Thus the gospel, the converts, and the preacher, or the evangelized, and the evangelist, all exhibited the same principle that God's power operates best in human weakness. Dwell on that. chew on that for a while. God's power operates best in human weakness. That's not the way we think, is it? We want big, better, best, influential, even in church and in church ministries. But that crowds out God's power. God's power is best seen and comes out when we're weak, when we recognize our weakness and our inability to do anything apart from Christ, as he says we can. Let me read that sentence again. Thus the gospel, the converts, and the preacher, or, and I like this, great 3-point alliterated sermon, the evangelized, and the evangelist all exhibited the same principle, that God's power operates best in human weakness. Take that as a kingdom principle. God's power operates best in human weakness. For God chose a weak instrument, Paul, to bring a weak message, the cross, to weak people, the socially despised. But through this triple weakness, the power of God was and still is displayed. Worship the Lord today. Wherever you're going to be, make the effort to be with other believers. That family connectedness needs to be developed. It is what God created for us. Because we're weak, we need the community of the saints. Do your best to connect with them today and every day, that you will not be left alone and find yourself possibly to be easy pickings for the enemy. Blessings to you today on this Lord's Day.